President Trump's tariffs are causing harm to American families and causing harm to American businesses. The third largest trading partner in the world, President Trump's trade war with American allies. In Dearborn, the factory floor is silent. A single forklift idles beside an unfinished line of trucks. The air heavy with the smell of oil and dust. Overnight, the announcement hit. 7 of America's most iconic companies, from Ford to Boeing, are packing up and moving north to Canada. Entire towns aerolosing their lifeblood in a single press release. Supply chains collapse. Research labs go dark. Decades of industrial pride vanish in months. This isn't just about a border crossing. It's a countdown. Every departure drains more jobs, more innovation, more confidence from the American core. So why are they leaving? How many more will go before we hit the point where the loss can't be reversed? Number 7. Ford Motor Company, Detroit's ultimate betrayal. Ford Motor Company, the company that literally put America on wheels, announced on January 2025 that it was relocating its electric vehicle manufacturing operations to a massive new facility in Windsor, Ontario. Imagine this. The company founded by Henry Ford, the architect of the American assembly line, deciding that America is no longer the best place to build cars. Ford's reasoning was coldly calculated. Canada's universal healthcare system eliminated $18,000 per employee. In annual healthcare costs, a savings of over $75 million annually for Ford's workforce alone. Ontario's electric vehicle incentives offered $300 million in tax credits over 5 years, while the Canadian federal government added another $150 million in research and development funding. But perhaps most devastating, Canadian workers were 25% more productive per dollar spent than their American counterparts. When Ford's executives analyzed the numbers, they found that an assembly line worker in Windsor cost $42 per hour in total compensation, compared to $68 per hour for an equivalent worker in Dearborn. The currency advantage sealed the deal. Manufacturing in Canadian dollars while selling vehicles globally meant Ford could undercut competitors by 12% while maintaining identical profit margins. In Dearborn, Michigan, Ford's historic home for over a century, the announcement felt like a betrayal of everything the company represented. Workers who had spent decades building Ford's reputation watched as the company chose profit margins over patriotic loyalty. The ripple effects were immediate and brutal. Local parts suppliers lost their biggest customer overnight, forcing layoffs at dozens of smaller manufacturers throughout Southerist, Michigan. The diner where Ford workers had eaten lunch for 3 generations reduced its hours, then laid off half its staff, then closed entirely. Even the credit union that had served Ford families for 80 years began planning layoffs as deposits evaporate and loan defaults spiked. For the Henderson family, Ford's departure meant end of a 3-generation legacy. Grandfather William had started at Ford in 1967, building Mustangs on the River Rouge assembly line. Father Robert had followed in 1997, working his way up tow shift supervisor. A 24-year-old Michael, fresh out of engineering school, watched his planned career at Ford disappear across the Detroit River. 3 generations of my family helped build Ford's reputation, Michael said. Now they're building their future somewhere else. The psychological impact extended far beyond individual families. Ford had been more than an employer. It had been the foundation of Michigan's automotive identity. Workers had believed they were building the best vehicles in the world for America's most iconic automotive company, Ford Michigan. Ford's departure wasn't just an economic loss, it was the end of an era. The state that had given birth to the modern automotive industry was watching its heritage cross the border to Canada. But if losing Ford felt like a betrayal, what came next would prove that America's industrial bleeding was just beginning. A number 6. General Electric American Innovation heads north. The company that electrified America and pioneered countless technologies from light bulbs to jet engines announced in March 2025 that it was moving its primary research and development, Parians, to Toronto. Over 3,800 high-paying engineering and research positions would be transferred to Canada within 18 months. This wasn't just any company. GA had been synonymous with American innovation for over 130 years. It held more than 50,000 patents employed some of the world's brightest minds, and had contributed to everything from nuclear power to medical imaging. Thomas Edison himself had founded the company, building it into a symbol of American ingenuity. Now that intellectual firepower was heading north. GE's executives painted a stark picture of American decline during their announcement. Canadian immigration policies allowed the company to recruit global talent with minimal restrictions. A software engineer from India could be working in Toronto within 90 days, while the same hire for an American facility might wait 2 years for visa approval. Canada's superior internet infrastructure, with average speeds 40% faster than comparable American cities, made it ideal for data-intensive research operations. Ontario's research and development tax credits worth 37.5% effectively cut GE's R&D costs by more than a third. Combined with federal Canadian incentives, the total government support package reached $420 million over 5 years. American states had offered competing packages, but none could match the speed and certainty of Canada's offer. The brain drain was immediate and devastating. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a material scientist who had spent 15 years developing advanced turbine components at GE's Schenectady facility, found herself facing an impossible choice. Follow the company to Toronto and abandon the community where her family had lived for generations, or stay behind and watch her career in cutting-edge research disappear. "We're not just losing jobs," Dr. Walsh said during a local news interview. "We're losing America's technological soul. The next breakthrough in clean energy might be developed in Toronto instead of Schenectady." In Schenectady, New York, where GE had operated for over 120 years, the announcement shattered a community's identity. 3 generations of families had worked for GE, building everything from power turbines to medical equipment. The company had been the cornerstone of the local economy, supporting not just direct employees, but entire supply chains of specialized manufacturing and service providers. Local universities that had partnered with GE on research projects faced massive funding shortfalls. Renalair Polytechnic Institute, which had received over $30 million annually in research contracts, began cutting graduate programs in electrical engineering and material science. The University of Albany eliminated its Advanced Manufacturing Research Center entirely. Small businesses through the Capital District felt the impact immediately. The restaurant where GE engineers held weekly lunch meetings saw Amway drop 60%. The office supply company that had served GE for 40 years laid off a third of its workforce. Even the hotel where visiting researchers stayed began planning layoffs as corporate bookings evaporated. For New York's technology sector, GE's departure prompted more than a corporate relocation. It was an extinction event that signaled the end of the state's role as an innovation hub. Yet, even as communities reeled from GE's departure, the aviation industry was preparing to deliver an even more crushing blow to American pride. Number 5. Boeing. America's aviation pride takes flight. The aerospace giant announced in May 2025 that it was consolidating its North American operations in a new facility outside Montreal. The decision eliminated 5,100 jobs across plants in Washington, South Carolina, and Pennsylvania. The symbolism was devastating. Boeing had helped America in World War II reach the moon and dominate global aviation for decades. The company's aircraft had carried American presidents, transported millions of passengers, and projected American technological power around the world. Now it was taking its expertise across the border. Boeing justification revealed uncomfortable truths about American competitiveness in global markets. Canadian aerospace companies faced significantly fewer export restrictions when selling to international customers, while American companies navigated complex ITAR regulations, endless export licenses, and State Department approvals that could take months. Canadian competitors moved freely in global markets with streamlined approval processes. The regulatory burden was crushing Boeing's international competitiveness. A commercial aircraft component that took 6 months to approve for export from the United States could be shipped from Canada within 6 weeks. For an industry where timing often determined contract awards, This advantage was decisive. Quebec's aerospace cluster offered additional compelling advantages. The province's aerospace tax credits reduced Boeing's effective tax rate to just 11.5% compared to Washington State's 27% combined federal and state burden. Energy costs were 45%, lower thanks to Quebec's abundant hydroelectric power. But perhaps most importantly, Quebec offered something American states couldn't: guaranteed long-term contracts and regulatory stability spanning decades. The currency advantage was equally compelling. Canadian dollar's historical weakness against the US dollar made Canadian operations roughly 20% cheaper than equivalent American facilities, allowing Boeing to price its aircraft more competitively in global markets. In Everett, where Boeing had assembled jumbo jets for over 50 years, workers watched in disbelief as their life's work was dismantled and shipped north. The plant had employed 1,200 people directly and supported tens of thousands more in the surrounding aerospace ecosystem. Aircraft mechanic Carlos Ramirez Hohat spent 28 years building Boeing 747s. Captured the workers' devastation. It helped build the planes that carried presidents and kings. My father worked here before me, and I thought my son would too. Now they're telling us American workers aren't good enough anymore. The ripple effects devastate the entire Puget Sound region. Aerospace suppliers throughout Washington faced catastrophic revenue losses as their largest customer departed. Spirit Aerosystems, which manufactured fuselage sections exclusively for Boeing, announced it was following the company to Quebec, eliminating another 2,400 American jobs. Within months, unemployment in Everett spiked from 3.1% to 14.2%. Levels not seen since the early 1980s recession. Home values plummeted as workers fled the area or defaulted on mortgages they could no longer afford. The school district, which had prided itself on STEM programs that fed directly into Boeing careers, began cutting advanced mathematics and engineering courses. Local colleges that had trained students specifically for aerospace careers annually in 3 meters research contracts began cutting graduate programs and laying off faculty. Mallister College eliminated its advanced chemistry research program entirely. Small businesses through those Twin Cities metropolitan area felt the impact. As 3M's highly paid researchers stopped spending money locally, the restaurants near 3M's headquarters saw revenues plummet. The office parks that housed 3 meters satellitefalities began reporting massive vacancy rates as the company consolidated operations. Even Minnesota's venture capital ecosystem began migrating north as investors followed the relocated research operations. Firms that had specialized in funding startups based on 3 meters technologies began opening Vancouver offices to stay close to the innovation pipeline. For Minnesota's technology sector and America's broader innovation economy, 3M's departure was more than a corporate relocation. It was an extinction event that signaled the end of American leadership in industrial research and development. Yet, even as America's innovation capacity crossed its border, the agricultural heartland was about to suffer its most devastating blow yet. Number 2, John Deere Heartland betrayal. The agricultural equipment manufacturer that has powered American farming for over 180 years, John Deere announced in November 2025 that it would relocate its primary manufacturing operations to Winnipeg, Manitoba, resulting in the loss of 7,200 jobs across facilities in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas. Nothing could have prepared America's heartland for this betrayal. John Deere wasn't just a company, it was an institution, Wavanento, the fabric of American agriculture. Its green and yellow tractors were synonymous with American farming, symbols of the productivity and innovation that had made America the world's breadbasket and transformed the Great Plains into the most productive agricultural region in human history. Now those symbols were crossing the border. The company that had helped feed the world for nearly 2 centuries was abandoning the very farmers who had built its reputation. John Deere's departure represented more than an economic disaster. It was a cultural apocalypse that struck at the heart of rural American identity. Deere's justification revealed the harsh realities of modern agricultural economics and the failure of American policy to support its most fundamental injury, Canadian agricultural policies provided more stable, long-term support for farming equipment manufacturers. Through predictable subsidy programs and consistent regulatory frameworks, provincial incentives offered tax-free status for agricultural manufacturing operations, while federal Canadian support included guaranteed commodity price support that created stable demand for farm equipment. The infrastructure at Edmonton were equally compelling. Canada's superior rail and port systems made it significantly easier to serve global markets that now represented 60% of John Deere's revenue. Winnipeg's port could handle the company's largest equipment exports directly to international markets, while its rail connections provided guaranteed delivery schedules that American logistics networks couldn't match. The currency advantage sealed the deal. Manufacturing in Canadian dollars while selling globally meant Deere could price its equipment 15% more competitively than American-based competitors while maintaining identical profit margins. Manitoba's $450 million incentive pack over 8 years, combined with guaranteed industrial electricity rates and streamlined environmental approvals, made the economic case overwhelming. Canadian operations would be 28% more profitable than equivalent American facilities. In Moline, Illinois, where John Deere had been headquartered since 1848, the announcement felt like the end of American agriculture. The company had been the cornerstone of the regional economy for 177 years, supporting not just direct employees, but entire supply chains of parts manufacturers, dealers, and service providers that stretched across the Midwest. Sarah Martinez, whose family had worked for Deere for 4 generations, summed up the heartbreak. My great-grandfather helped build the tractors that broke Thepri and fed America during World War II. My grandfather designed the combines that made America the world's breadbasket. My father engineered the precision equipment that revolutionized herd farming. Now they're saying America isn't worth building for anymore. The ripple effects devastate rural communities across the Midwest. With unprecedented speed and scope, part suppliers lost their largest customer overnight, forcing immediate layoffs at hundreds of smaller manufacturers throughout Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. Truck drivers who hauled Deere equipment faced unemployment as shipping volume asseverated. Even the small-town banks that had financed farm equipment purchases for generations saw their business models collapse. Agricultural colleges that had trained students specifically for careers with Deere began cutting programs wholesale. Iowa State University eliminated its agricultural landing program. University of Illinois closed its farm equipment design center. Purdue University canceled its precision agriculture research initiative. Research partnerships between universities and John Deere evaporated, taking with them millions in funding for agricultural innovation. The loss of these partnerships threatened America's leadership in agricultural technology development, potentially ceding the future of farming innovation to Canadian institutions. Local business estrate, rural America felt the economic shock waves immediately. Farm equipment dealerships faced catastrophic and very losses as their supply chains were severed. Small-town main streets that had thrived on the prosperity John Deere brought to farming communities began boarding up storefronts. For rural America, John Deere's departure wasn't just an economic disaster. It was a cultural apocalypse that severed the connection between American agriculture and American manufacturing that had existed for nearly 2 centuries. But as devastating as John Deere's betrayal was to rural America, the final company's departure would prove to be the most catastrophic blow to American industrial pride in modern history. Number 1. General Motors, the ultimate American automotive betrayal. Once the largest corporation in the world and the undisputed symbol of American automotive dominance, General Motors announced in December 2025 that it would relocate its entire North American manufacturing operations to Ontario, Canada. A move that would cut over 15,000 jobs across plants in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kansas, and Texas. This wasn't just any company. GM had been America's automotive champion for over a century. The corporation that had powered America through World War II put the nation on wheels during the post-war boom and defined American industrial might for generations of workers and families. Ow! It was abandoning America entirely. The symbolism was staggering, and the implications terrifying. General Motors was more than a car company. It was the embodiment of American industrial power. For decades, the phrase, "What's good for General Motors is good for America," had defined the relationship between corporate success and national prosperity. Now, General Motors was declaring that what was good for General Motors was Canada, not America. GEM's rezoning was as calculated as it was devastating. Ontario's universal healthcare system eliminated $22,000 per employee in annual healthcare costs. Savings that totaled over $300, $30 million annually for GM's massive workforce. This single factor alone made Canadian operations dramatically more profitable than American alternatives. Provincial tax incentives offered an additional $500 million in credits over 5 years, while federal Canadian supertinkle preferential trade access to European and Asian markets that American manufacturers faced barriers to enter. The total government support package reached nearly $1 billion, funding that no American state could hope to match. But the real advantage was productivity and cost efficiency. Canadian auto workers were 30% more productive per dollar spent than their American counterparts, thanks to superior training programs, more efficient work rules, streamlined union agreements, and significantly lower overall compensation costs. The currency factor provided Thefanol decisive advantage. Manufacturing in Canadian dollars while selling globally meant GM could undercut every American competitor by 15% while maintaining identical profit margins. In an industry where price competition determined market share, this advantage was insurmountable. Ontario's automotive cluster offered additional compelling benefits. The province's existing network of part suppliers, logistics providers, and skilled workers created an ecosystem that could support GM's massive manufacturing requirements initially. Superior port facilities provided direct access to global markets, while reliable rail and highway systems ensured efficient domestic distribution. In Detroit, the Motor City that GM had built and sustained for generations. The announcement felt like the final nail in America's automotive coffin. The company had been Michigan's largest private employer for over 80 years, supporting not just direct workers, but hundreds of thousands of jobs throughout the automotive supply chain that stretched across the Midwest and South. Workers who had dedicated their lives to building GM via watched in disbelief as their life's work was declared obsolete by the very company they had served faithfully for decades. These weren't minimum wage jobs. These were skilled manufacturing positions that had supported middle-class families for generations and defined the American dream for millions of workers. The psychological effect was as devastating as the economic catastrophe. They were building the best cars in the world for the best automotive company in the world, carrying forward a tradition of American manufacturing excellence that dated back to the early 20th century. Now they were learning that the best place to build cars was apparently Canada, and that American workers were no longer competitive in the global marketplace. Within days of the announcement, Detroit's unemployment rate spiked to 18%, levels not seen since the devastating recession of 2008 and 2009. Home values in automotive neighborhoods plummeted by an average of 40% as workers fled the area or defaulted on mortgages they could no longer afford with their anticipated unemployment benefits. The ripple effect spread far beyond Detroit and Michigan, devastating automotive communities across the industrial Midwest. Part suppliers in Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and Wisconsin lost their largest customers simultaneously, forcing immediate plant closures and mass layoffs. Trucking companies that hauled GM vehicles faced bankruptcy as shipping volumes evaporated overnight. Even the railroads that transported automotive components and finished vehicles saw revenues collapse as one of their largest customers disappeared across the border. The Norfolk Southern and CX road systems, which had invested billions in automotive logistics infrastructure, began planning massive layoffs and service reductions. For America's automotive industry, GM's departure wasn't just a corporate evocation. It was a surrender of global leadership that had taken more than a century to build, could never be recovered. How close are we to the edge? 7 corporate giants have already crossed the border. How many more will follow before the damage is permanent?